Past am I, and welcome to this week's agenda. I'm Phil Gawne. Does experience help in politics? We're about to find out. This week, Bill Henderson talks about his success in Tynwald, praises the Chief Minister, expresses his concern over lack of attention to climate change and protection of our biosphere, and much more. He's also the grandfather of Tynwald, but doesn't like you mentioning that.
Sounds a bit overwhelming, to be quite honest, Phil. I wouldn't call myself grandfather of Tynwald because of my age, but I've certainly now, by default, I'm the longest serving member in Tynwald, and I've done 23 years there so far. I've seen off 5 chief ministers, 5 governors, 5 presidents, 4 general elections and 2 LegCo elections. Must hasten to add I'm including the current serving Chief Minister in those statistics and the new Governor when he arrives, Sir John Lorimer. But quite a political landscape over the years, that's for sure.
And during that time, there's a fair amount has happened, it's fair to say. Certainly in terms of, there's no secret, your politics are probably more left of centre than right of centre. You're a big supporter of Unite the Union, I'm a fully subscribed member of Unite, or the Transport and General Workers Union as was, and quite proud of my work there and with Bernard Moffat. What would you say you would be your proudest achievements over the course of that 20 plus years in Tynwald?
Well, looking back over the years, I've placed numerous motions to Tynwald. One of the probably greatest achievements to me as a personal effort was to achieve the compensation for Far Eastern prisoners of war during World War II of the Japanese. I asked the government of the day, would they compensate for the horrendous treatment that was meted out to those men and women and civilians at the time. There was a special case being ramped up in England. Blair at the time was having absolutely nothing to do with it. I was approached here by the forces, and I've absolutely 100% supportive. Put the question to Tynwald, I was told no. So I went for it big style and placed a motion, and I think I got it unanimously in the end. And it was agreed that ex-prisoners of war from the Far East, from the Japanese, would be compensated. But that went worldwide, Phil. I hadn't realised in my naivety in those days just who listens into Tynwald. Certainly the international press were on to me following the success of the motion, London, Canada, and all over the place. And within the week, questions were being placed in Westminster on Blair's government, I think it was at the time, and in the end they caved in under the pressure, which I hadn't realised the effect of what I was trying to do in Tynwald. So that was a huge thing that occurred, and certainly gave the justifiable recognition to those men and women during that horrific period.
And of course, I think sometimes Tynwald members maybe underestimate the power that they actually have. Our Parliament, Tynwald, is seen by the parliaments amongst the British Commonwealth as an equal. And if an important motion like that gets passed in our Tynwald, then the question reasonably is asked in all the other Commonwealth parliaments if the Isle of Man can do it, why can't we?
Well, that was certainly the case, and it was certainly the case in Westminster. What it did cause in the background on the build-up to that motion was the contacts I made, which were truly international. Even officials from the Canadian government were assisting. I had people in Australia, New Zealand, all over the place. The huge interest in this was just mind-boggling, to be quite honest. And it's a pity we didn't get the recognition to start with here, but nonetheless, I ploughed on with my motion, and one of the highlights of that long debate was the Lord Bishop at the time, Noel Jones, who was standing up over the parapet of Ledgeco, lecturing the Chief Minister of the day on the justification of what I was trying to do, and it was a heavy-duty debate, but nonetheless well fought, as it were, and I got the men and women who, as I say, deserved it, and the letters and support I got afterwards was absolutely phenomenal, Phil. It was humbling, actually, very humbling.
Do you think that sometimes we limit our aspirations a little unnecessarily?
I think we do limit our aspirations, maybe not intentionally, and I think some of it's down to the fact because you get so bogged down in your own national issues and the pressures on the community locally, that you become stuck within those issues, and it's hard sometimes, I'm sure, and certainly for myself, to actually look out over the parapets of Tynwald and indeed the borders of the Isle of Man to get a better feel. Although I have to say I do keep an eye on the international picture. It's one of my special interests in the background. Always been wary of, or trying to be as astute as I can in observing what's happening around the world as well, and the effects. But yes, the effect of what we do in Tynwald, it is listened to in Westminster, and certainly in the UK government do keep an eye on things. Nothing else, but even just for an interest's sake. And it's surprising, and that's what we forget, I think, is how far sometimes the effects of what Tynwald can achieve reaches out to, and it's something we should look at and use more, probably. Yes, definitely.
Perhaps then the message to our new brood of MHKs is actually expand your horizons, think big.
It's easy to become embroiled in what's affecting the Isle of Man, what's affecting us locally, the stresses and the strains, how Brexit's affected us locally, how Corona has affected us locally. Yet you need to look further than that to see the effects in the United Kingdom in general, the British Isles, European effects, international effects, and it helps you form, or certainly for me, a more rounded picture, if you like, of and concepts of just what is going on and how to address things here locally, bring it back in to taper what you're doing and what kind of views you're putting forward.
I don't know whether you remember this, but when I first stood for election, you gave me loads of really good advice on how to go about canvassing. I was particularly grateful to you at the time, and whether that was a good or a bad thing, I'm not so sure, but it was certainly very useful. Have you got any top tips for the prospective MHKs who are busily out there worried sick about the whole thing and how they're going to get round all the houses?
Far be from me to tell people how to go about an election. Some are probably far better than I was. Certainly lessons I've learnt over the years is that if you want to work in the House of Keys and you want to serve in a national parliament and you really want that, then you have to really, really work hard at it. There's no question about that. And the fundamental in the middle of all of that is that you have to make the effort to get round every door in your constituency. No question of that. You have to show people that you are really up for it and putting the effort in and taking the time to meet people. I know it's a huge job. I've done it 4 times and by golly, it's stressful and all the rest of it, but people really appreciate the personal touch. one other important thing, of course, is writing your manifesto. I know these days we're limited because of the cash spending cap that's been put on the general election, which I think's a shame. I spoke out about it in Tynwald at the time. It curbs a candidate's ability to put out the printed material, to lay out their policies, and what you end up with is a small sheetlet which, at times it belittles a candidate who may be a formidable have the ability to be a formidable MHK, where they just have to put law and order, we need more police on the streets, whereas if you have more scope, then you can lay out your policies a bit better. I know these days you can put your manifesto online and have your own website and so on, which does help, but I think it limits the ability for a candidate to express themselves and put clear, defined views down. But your manifesto and your advertising material are critical. That's what people are looking at, and certainly the hard copies that come through the letterboxes, that's something the genuine voters will sit down and look at, so that's very important.
You're listening to Bill Henderson, MLC.
I think we need to dispel a myth to start with, Phil, in that there was a lot of clamour at the time when all the new members came in. The people of the Isle of Man have spoken, and there was an impression in the media that there'd been a big clear out and loads of the old guard had been sacked, and that's what the general public thought. In reality, 7 of the sitting MHKs at the time retired. So there was vacant seats to start with, so we shouldn't forget that. But nonetheless, we had 12 new members of the House of Keys, and it changed the whole dynamic of Tynwald completely, and for the better, I would say. And what we ended up with is a consignment to the bin of the old confrontational politics that had been going on for nearly 15 years or so. Bitter debates and rows in Tynwald, criticisms, destructive criticism all the time. It must have been at times for government like ploughing through liquid cement, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and hugely difficult to try and achieve anything in that kind of atmosphere or battlefield.
But is that not the role of Tynwald, really, to hold government to account, to be critical and perhaps be passionate about the topics?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil, but there's a way to do that. And the old style was certainly hugely confrontational, to the point of being bitterness at times in debates, personal, and lots of other acrimonious issues that were going on as well, where it seemed to me to almost paralyse the system, Tynwald, and indeed government at times. And government became, to me, separated from the backbenchers in a way, polarised. Or the backbenchers, or certainly a good proportion of them, were polarised from government, whichever way you want to look at it. This time round, and I have to praise the current Chief Minister, because he's tried his best to work with a consensus, Tynwald, and bring things together more. And I think that's been achieved in a way. We've still got examination, criticism, but in a constructive way that actually is positive, in that it tests and probes government policy, examines government plans, the programme for government and so on. To me, in a far more constructive way, balanced, and has enabled a different political atmosphere altogether. And I think Tynwald's been more effective as far as that goes, enabled to scrutinise and debate and construct proper reasoned argument.
How would you say the current government has done in relation, and indeed Tynwald has done in relation to things like the biosphere, the climate emergency? Are we allowed to call it a climate emergency? How do you think Tynwald has performed with regards to those issues?
Well, if you've been specific down to the point of biosphere, climate emergency and so on, our Chief Minister did announce it was a climate emergency and moved and got the climate change legislation through, which is going to become law now. He recognised that, and the government did at the time. However, the sceptics amongst us would say, well, if it's a climate emergency, why aren't we doing more at the time, and why aren't we doing more now, and why aren't we recognising more now? Why are we having issues with planning which allows a whole string of or avenue of mature elm trees, for instance, to be chopped down? I know it's been stopped, but the point is the system still allowed that to occur to start with for an approval, whereas there should now be criteria in place over a template put over the planning process, which causes everyone, including the professionals who look at it, to put climate change, biosphere criteria on the planning process before we even get to the nitty-gritty of the application. So there's a lot that needs changing. To me personally, we haven't moved quickly or fast enough. We've been seriously warned by the latest United Nations report, I think it is, that the world is now at tipping point and there may not be much we can do to save the planet, only some mitigation going forward. And we're back to the thing, what do governments internationally, not just this government, want to leave their children and grandchildren? What kind of place will it be in 20, 30 years for our kids and our grandkids to grow up? To me, there's a very slow pace with regards to tree replacement programs and all the rest of it. Ash dieback's only one thing. You can see the decimation throughout the hedgerows in the island now. You can see mature trees that are half the trees got no leaves on, and you can see the effects. Dutch elm disease is the same. We've had a disease on oak trees as well. And other diseases, and really the department has been slow. It has recognised the issues, and it's certainly, it's got a small woods planting scheme and so on, and the Chief Minister organised the planting of a new woodland and so on. All good stuff, but I'm afraid we're not giving it the impetus that it should be having, in all honesty. If we're going to retain our biosphere status, and I've warned them all in Tynwald about that, UNESCO are quite happy to deregister places if they're not performing well or building on what they've got. And as I say, we look at the recent debacle over the elm trees and other developments, and where we see trees being cut down willy-nilly in the name of what people call, or developers call, it's progressive development, and we need this and we need that. We still haven't got, for instance, biodiversity net gain regulations in place, which causes developers, if they start on a greenfield site, then they have to put back the biodiversity in other ways and around about that development that they've taken out to at least what it was and more. We're not seeing that at the minute, and I've been on and on about that. So it's something that this coming Tynwald over the next 5 years is going to have to face up to. It all interconnects with our biosphere status, and ultimately it interconnects with our bit towards climate change and pollution and everything else. And the things that really irk me are the slowness to respond to. Why do people sit in cars parked up outside schools with engines running? Why do delivery trucks outside shops, maybe for up to half an hour, leave the trucks running? What's that all about? Why do buses at the bus station leave the engines on idle? I was told in Tynwald there's a law that makes that illegal, but it's an ancient law for health and safety reasons. Nobody's actually been prosecuted, as far as I know, for doing that, or on-the-spot fines. We need to actually put the action in place. We need to not only speak the speak, we need to walk the walk, Phil.
And I suppose many of the departments would potentially respond by saying, well, if only we had the money, times are hard, budgets have been cut for 10 years or more, how are we going to manage?
I mean, the thing with departments moaning about Treasury and all the rest of it's one thing. We've had to steer through, at the end of the day, the island through two monumental crises, one being Brexit. Well, maybe crisis is too strong, but certainly the effects of Brexit and everything that's gone with that, and the expense and the strain on the Manx Exchequer. And then we've had the coronavirus, which has put the island in extraordinary times and under extraordinary financial pressure, the likes of which have never been seen before. I don't think the island's ever faced off such a threat since probably the Second World War. In terms of that and the pressures on the community, the social pressures and everything else, and it's caused not only government funds to fall off during that, but to shore up and support the community. It's the lack of income to various government departments as well, and all the other issues that have cropped up over the past 18 months, I suppose, and it's caused enormous financial pressure. And in between that, as you say, then the government and Treasury have had to look at the likes of the steam packet, major capital projects, and try and keep the community moving forward as best it can. But having said that, the things I've pointed out for a biosphere and for climate change, they are small beer, Phil, and all the departments could quite easily move forward with some of the things I've been suggesting in Tynwald, even to the point where the Department of Education, for instance, could send out or organise for the schools to send out newsletters and flyers for all the schools' car parks for parents to turn the engines off for those that leave the engines idling right outside school doors. And I see this picking my kids up at regular intervals, and I cannot believe it that people still have, the penny still has not dropped about pollution and the effects on the kids in that kind of close proximity actually has on them, never mind the climate and atmosphere that's going on. So there's loads of stuff we could be doing, and departments could be leading in this, that is not actually going to cost very much, if anything at all, Phil. It's getting people to change the way they act and behave socially, and how we are about our own homes, even energy conservation, water conservation at home, using too much water and so on. There's a plethora, hundreds of little things we could all do, make changes, and it makes such a difference. And that in itself would send a signal out that if we can do it, why can't other places do it?
And what is it specifically, would you say, that you're looking for from a candidate?
I want a well-rounded candidate who's got an eye on the Manx national politics, but also a good eye on the British Isles and international politics, the threats the island's facing locally and internationally. But I want somebody who can look me in the face and say that they are truly going to make an effort to enhance our biosphere from the conservation point of view, which is the core of any biosphere, and also push for the changes we need for climate change and the positive changes that's required, and push for the island to be a world leader.
That's all from Bill Henderson and me. I hope you found it interesting. You can listen to a podcast of this discussion on Manx Radio's website and on Spotify. For now, Guramayu. Thanks for listening.